For 26-year-old John Jones, a simple Thanksgiving trip became a nightmare. Trapped in a cave more than 100 feet underground in a canal 10 x 18 inches wide, John Jones hung upside down for over 28 hours. With blood and fluid rushing to his head and filling his lungs, he knew he only had a few hours left to live. In this moment, he did the only thing he had left to do: pray and reflect on the terrible turn of events that led him here. On November 24, 2009, John Jones, a 26-year-old medical student, his brother, and 9 others, all friends and family, were on their way to the recently reopened Nutty Putty Cave. The brothers had come home for Thanksgiving, but before driving to their parents' house near Salt Lake City, they decided to go on a small caving excursion with some old friends. The brothers John and Josh had been avid cave explorers in their childhood. Their family would often go on caving outings, exploring systems and seeing how far they could go. However, John hadn't gotten back into the hobby for years, as he was focused on his med school in Virginia. So, as they reached the Nutty Putty Cave, he saw it as a throwback to old times, and time to reconnect with his brother and friends. Nevertheless, at 8 p.m., after a small hike to the entrance of the cave, the 11-person group finally started making their way through the system of rooms and passages. At the entrance of Nutty Putty, there's what's described to be a 15-foot drop before you get to the actual cave system, at which point, you can either choose to go down the big slide or the maze. Before they'd entered, John and Josh had set their sights on one of the tightest passages in the cave, called the Birth Canal. Having a map of the cave with them, they slowly made their way down towards it. However, after reaching a certain part of the cave, the brothers were confused on where to go, and the map didn't seem to be helping, so Josh and John split up to go look for the birth canal. It was at this point when John made a wrong turn and started heading towards Ed's Push. As the map shows, Ed's Push doesn't lead to an opening or a larger room. In fact, it has 4 uncharted passageways at its end because it gets so narrow that no one has been able to map the whole area. Nevertheless, John pushed himself further and further down this passage, to the point where it got so narrow, John realized he couldn't turn around. His only option was to keep going until he found a spot big enough for him to turn his body around and go back. Eventually, John found a narrow fissure going straight down that seemed like it had an opening at the end. Getting ready to go in, John sucked in his stomach to get past the lip of rock, but when he exhaled again, he found himself stuck. His hands were pinned behind him and at his side, and he knew no matter how much he kicked his feet or shifted around, he wouldn't be able to get out on his own. Further attempts to free himself made him slide further down the passage. At this point, John knew that he couldn't get out of this cell alone, so all he could do was wait for his brother Josh to find him. Eventually, Josh did find John and tried everything in his power to get him out. He tried pulling him by his feet, but that didn't seem to help. He tried guiding John through movement that could help him get unstuck, but after realizing his position, he knew that wouldn't work either. Becoming increasingly worried, Josh left to call 911. But John wasn't the only one to have gotten stuck at Nutty Putty. Cavers had frequently gotten stuck in the cave network before, which led to controversy on whether it was even safe to be open to the public. This led to it be closed in 2006, until proper safety precautions were put into place, and reopened in 2009. Most notably in 2004, rescuers had to extract 2 people from the cave. One was a 16-year-old boy and the other, a 23-year-old man. It was moment rescuers had worked so hard for. As deep as 150 feet underground, 16-year-old Brock Clark exhausted, but not seriously hurt. David Crowther found getting inside the Nutty Putty Cave was not so bad, but getting out, at least on his own, was impossible.
Because the rocks were just stuck, like in my side, and so like my ribs wouldn't fit to go backwards and my hip wouldn't fit to go forward.
But neither of them were a 200-pound man hanging upside down, so John's chances were looking increasingly slim. Which brings us back to Josh calling 911. Rescuers arrived around 3 hours after John had gotten stuck. The first rescuer to actually reach him, did so at around 12:30 p.m., but because of the position in which John was stuck, it was almost impossible to remove him. For the first few hours, rescuers tried everything they could think of. They tried cutting off his jeans to give him some wiggle room. They tried tying a rope to John's legs and pulling from the entrance of the cave, but the friction of the rope against the rocks rendered it useless. Small equipment to try and chisel away the rock took too long, and large equipment was too dangerous. They even tried ordering vegetable oil to slip John out, but something was becoming more and more apparent as the hours went on. John didn't have much time left. Because he was upside down, blood and fluids pool in the brain and lungs, meaning his circulation can slow, and toxins can build up in his blood. Even if rescuers were to free John, setting him upright again could kill him because the toxins that had rushed to his head would flow down to his heart and be pumped to the rest of his body, killing him. His heart rate was slowing down, and breathing was getting slower and shallower. The odds were stacked against him, and as time went on, John started to feel the hopelessness of his situation. On top of this, it was clear to rescuers that the angle at which John was stuck would mean that they couldn't lift him straight up out of the fissure, and that they would have to break both John's legs to even have a chance of fully freeing him. Nevertheless, rescuers from all over Utah started lending their support, and with this, a new strategy was implemented. The 2004 rescue from Nutty Putty was carried out using a pulley system, so the same system was tried with John. At first, they tried to run the rope along climbing cams, but they soon found out that the walls of the cave weren't strong enough to hold John's weight. So, they rebuilt the pulley system by drilling into the cave walls. Knowing they only had a few hours left, rescuers tied the rope around John's feet and tried pulling him up. And for a few hopeful seconds, John was being lifted out of the hole, until a carabiner the rescuers had put into the cave wall broke, leaving John to slide all the way back down to his original position. As rescuers installed a new carabiner, and as the 28th hour of John's predicament passed, John fell silent, unresponsive. All they could do at this point was have a paramedic check his condition. They pronounced him dead at 11:56 p.m. one day after he had gotten stuck. Unfortunately, John could not be removed in life or in death, as search and rescue teams deemed it too dangerous to try and recover his body. So, 28 gruesome hours after John went on a simple caving adventure with his friends, officials decided to seal Nutty Putty with John still inside, making the controversial cave system John's final resting place.